like this huge push for explicit teaching, and inquiry-based learning is not the thing. And does it have to be one or the other? Surely there is a way, and my incursion shows there is a way to have both in a way that is helpful for students and their learning. We do need the horse before the cart. You do need prior knowledge and skills to be explicitly taught, but you also then need the opportunity to use them, practice them, and develop them. So if we're standing at the front of the classroom reading from our script, is there enough opportunity to practice that skill? Because if we don't, then that information is going to file in and it's going to drip back out again. We need to find that balance.
Hello and welcome to Blooming Curious, the podcast that's all about nurturing that natural curiosity and love of learning in our elementary children and students. I'm Edwina, your host, and I'm on a mission to keep children curious and excited about learning. The days of talk and chalk are over. We're exploring the strategies that create engaged, lifelong learners. So if you're a classroom or homeschool educator, or even a curious parent, looking for creative, meaningful ways to engage children and move beyond the traditional classroom approach, then this is the place for you. Today we're welcoming Nicola Hoad, the founder of Play in the Past, to Blooming Curious. Nicola, who is originally from the UK, where she completed undergraduate studies in history, now calls Perth home, where she has been teaching grades 1 to 3. This is where she saw the magic of the early years brought to life by the many amazing educators she worked with. And this is also where her love for hands-on learning grew, and she saw firsthand the importance of allowing students to do history. For little people to make sense of the world around them, they have to hold it in their hands and play with it. And so, Play in the Past was born just 3 months after the birth of a little boy. It started with one kit for hire, and today is a thriving educational experience for little learners. And as Nicola says, it's a true blast in the past. Welcome to Blooming Curious, Nicola.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So nice to see you here and have you on the podcast. I've been following you for the longest time on social media and seeing all these fabulous gadgets and old artefacts that you have and bringing to schools, which is so exciting, especially for someone like me. I mean, I usually know what those old things are, but I know that for kids now they don't.
No,
so let's start with you giving the listener some background and what inspired you to start Play in the Past, especially, crazy woman, so soon after the birth of your son.
I know, it was a short turnaround, really. But Play in the Past had been an idea that was brewing for a while. I taught in year 1 for 3 years, and at the school I was at, year 1 was part of an early years campus. And so it was just this magical place of early years learning and play and hands-on experiences. It was truly the making of me as a teacher, being able to teach there. And the more I was teaching in year 1, the more I saw how important it was for little people to have those hands-on experiences. They needed to hold their learning in their hands, but they needed to play with it. And we were doing a history session, which was my passion when I was younger. And we had a typewriter and the magic in their eyes, their curiosity. It was just, you wanted to bottle it. That's what you want in your lessons. Every lesson that you do, just that sheer enthusiasm. And so I had that nugget of an idea. Like, I would love for other educators to have access to these resources, which it's quite tricky. To have a wide range of vintage items costs a lot of money, and you've got to source them, you've got to store them, you've got to worry about them getting broken. So a good alternative for that was to hire them. And so the little idea grew and grew, and I finally did it and put it out there, and it's gone gangbusters. And yeah, here we are today running incursions and offering a blast in the past for lots of little people.
That's amazing. So you've just said how you acquired these artifacts. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know I was teaching year two, for example, and that's part of the curriculum, the change in technology. And so it's really hard if you don't have a collection of old items to bring into the class. What we used to do, we used to say to the kids, look, can you all go and ask your grandparents and bring in something old? And it was amazing because we got so many of these artifacts from their grandparents who were in the war, and a piece of rock from someone's grandparent, I think it was from Mount Etna that erupted in Italy, and this piece of rock that landed on their grandparents' doorstep. And that's when I also saw, gosh, this is so interesting. And the kids really found these artifacts that they don't see today. So interesting. So how did you go about acquiring all these artifacts?
All the magic. I have done a lot of shopping, and I'm now on a self-imposed ban of op shops because and I'm sure all teachers can relate, when you go into an op shop, you've got your teacher brain and you look at everything as a potential learning resource. And so that's what I did. I knew I wanted to have items that linked to various concepts, so entertainment, communication, toys. And so that's what I was looking for. I went out and deliberately sought out some of these magic items. Every kit started with a typewriter and then a range of telephones. And I just was able to, like a magpie, I was finding all the treasure at op shops and then bringing it in. And then for our incursion, I knew I wanted some very special items. And so I would go to antique shops and look for very deliberate items that I was hunting down. And recently I've had lots and lots of donations. Lots of people, lots of grown-up educators that they've maybe had to empty mum and dad's house, and they've got all these treasures from memories from their childhood, and they don't want to get rid of it. They don't want to throw it out, but they don't want to keep it in their garage either. So I've been very lucky to have some very special donations that I've been able to share and give a new lease of life when they go out into classrooms or come out of my incursions. So yeah, a lot of shopping. A lot of shopping.
Is so good because, I have a husband who has no emotional ties to any objects at all. And we've moved from different countries, and then I'd open a box. He says, are you still taking this with you? I'm going, of course, it belonged to my grandma. I'm keeping this, know. So I can really relate to that. Those old things have real value and also an emotional connection for so many people. And if anybody's listening and you've got some artifacts from the past and you don't want them and you're no longer allowed to be a hoarder, please pass them on to Nicola, whose details we will share at the end of the show. Tell me, Nicola, what does an incursion look like? So you get invited to schools, they need you there, they need the artifacts. What does an incursion typically look like?
Yes. Well, magic from start to finish. So usually a teacher will be exploring that concept with their class, and they, depending on our availability and their programming, where they'd like to have that incursion. Some really like to use it as a hook. Others prefer it at the end of their unit as a finishing off moment. And what I would do is I've got my car is chock full of items that are sorted by concept. And we've got 4 rotation stations that I set up. And then when the students arrive, we have a very short mat session, a little bit of an explicit teaching session there. And what I do there is I model some comparative language, because the curriculum in early years wants us to compare change and continuity over time. Yes. And so I model that language for children. And then we do a group activity together called a tangible timeline. And we've got 5 telephones that are all jumbled up, and I choose 5 students to hold up the telephones, and then together we sort and order them so that we're creating a timeline together. So it follows very much that I do, I'm showing, using the language, and then together we use the language together to create the timeline. And I'm able to do a bit of a spot check on each telephone as well. So the first phone, the oldest phone, is our rotary phone. That's heavy, it's big, it's trickier to use. And then as we go along that timeline, we see some of those changes that have happened. And so once we've completed the timeline, I set some expectations and we split off into 4 groups, and then they'll rotate through the 4 stations. And we have our telephones and communications. We then have technology and typing. So that's where we have all of our music devices. We've got records, CDs, and a range of cameras. We've then got my favorite, which is the home corner. And so we've got dress ups and lots of vintage things from the home. And then lucky last is the toys and books station. So lots of vintage toys that they can play with and explore together. So
That
yeah, it's
sounds
pure
like
magic.
a magical experience. And I was just thinking about when I was doing that unit in year 2. Yes, the kids brought stuff in from home, but when you don't have those artifacts, physical, so for the kids to handle, I was doing a similar thing to you, but I had to use pictures of the telephones from the oldest to the latest. And even though they were arranging those photographs in order of the timeline, I'm telling you, it will have absolutely nothing on actually using and holding those objects physically in their hands, because that's that whole concrete understanding before the abstract, right? So what an
Definitely.
amazing opportunity that is for
It
children to
really
actually
is.
have that experience. So good on you.
One
On
of my
carry on.
recent sessions, at the end, I do a bit of a conclusion and tell me what you discovered. And one learner put their hand up and said, I just didn't realize how heavy the old telephone was going to be. And it's really heavy, and you can feel the metal underneath. They need 2 hands to hold it. And of course, they wouldn't have known in the real world the weight of
Everything's
that
light.
item. They wouldn't have known that if they hadn't been given the opportunity to hold it. You don't get that information or that sensory feedback from a picture or a video. So it is such a special experience for them.
And that was really going to lead to my question. I was going to ask you, what impact does this have on children's learning and understanding? And so I think you've already just explained
Yeah.
that. I mean, for them to hold that in their hands really cements that understanding of the changes in that technology for them. So amazing experience. Can you share a memorable reaction apart from that one that a child had when they were interacting with your artifacts? Do you have, I think you must have so many from the different
So many.
excursions that you've done, or
And
incursions rather.
and it's one of the best parts of it, because I can see the children, they're so curious and they're like, what is this thing? And I've got in our home corner an old bug spray. And it is, a lot of the grown-ups that come along don't immediately know what it is. And so there's this, they hold it up and they're looking on the quizzical look on their face, and they'll say, what is this? And my response is always, it's funny looking. I wonder, what do you think it might be? And then you get these wonderful random guesses about what this thing might be. And one was a pancake smasher. We've had flamethrower, because this item is so far from what they're used to that they've got to go to the weirdest places of their brain to come up with these ideas. And then when I tell them it's a bug spray, they're like, oh. And then we talk about how it's different from what we would use today. Today we use a spray can and we goes in the bin
Oh,
when we're
I don't know
done.
what you're talking about. I'm
I
pretty sure you wish you had
know.
it there, because I'm thinking aerosol
I,
can.
oh,
No,
it's
clearly not.
yeah, and it's like it's got a little canister, and it looks a bit like a bike pump, and on the end it's got a very
Oh,
small hole,
yes,
and you
yes.
pump it, and it will spray out the end. And it's so different to what we would use today, and just that no idea of what, I've got no prior experience with anything else that looks like this that I can draw on to understand what this item is. Like, they have to be told, I have to tell them, but they go through that process of elimination of what it could be before they go, oh, bug spray. I see that. So yeah, the bug spray is a great one.
Incredible. So, because of obviously the era we live in, and that would have been true for all children, I think, throughout time, is if you don't have schema, because you have no prior knowledge and no prior experience, that is going to be very hard for you to actually understand what this is. And so I think those physical objects, again, once more, really make that concrete for kids. As you were talking there, you were using wonder questions, I noticed. And it makes me think that your artifacts are essentially provocations that inspire questioning and wondering. And
Mhm.
for me, I immediately see them as a catalyst for inquiry projects.
Mhm.
So once the students, and I guess this is going to be different for every school and every teacher, but once they've had this incursion, what have you found are the usual next steps for educators in terms of capitalizing on children's curiosity around these artifacts?
Wow. My
Are you
hope is that when they go away, they're able to share the items that they had seen before and the items that they hadn't, and then comparing them to what they would use today. When you think about the function of an item, what we use today, and what are some of the changes that have happened, and what else could it be, and what might come next. And so that's my hope, that after the incursion, they're able to really take those concrete items to then build on their concepts of what if and what else. And so, yeah, that's my hope, that when they move forward, that they're able to build on those concrete experiences, being curious about what might come next or what else was there.
Because certainly these experiences that you're providing for children are certainly those wonder experiences, wondering
Mhm.
about those objects and what they were used for in the past and what they are.
Mhm.
So my thought was just that I wonder how educators then take the knowledge and the experience from this further, because it would be really, really sad if all they did was have the incursion and then, okay, that's
Mhm.
over, next thing now. My hope would be as well that these experiences that they have with your incursion, that would be the trigger for a whole learning experience into, well, how do we find out about objects? How do they work? What were they in the
Mhm.
past? What were they made of? How have they changed? How do we use the same type of technology today? That would be an amazing teaching
Definitely.
sequence, wouldn't it? And so
It
you're
would.
right. I guess we just hope that educators do take this
Mhm.
as maybe even a first step, and not a last step, but a first step into
Mhm.
an inquiry process and a unit of inquiry,
Trigger,
how
and like you say, a
technology has
provocation to
changed.
provoke
Yeah, if it's a
curiosity.
provocation, to me, the minute we were talking
Yeah.
and when I was looking at your website, I thought, well, these are provocations, and what a perfect first step into inquiry.
Sometimes there, I guess there's a scheduling
Issue.
issue
Yeah, yeah,
potentially
yeah,
there.
yeah,
I've only
yeah.
got so much availability, and often to get an incursion at the very beginning of your term, which is typically at the start of a new project, can sometimes be a little bit
Yeah,
tricky. The logistics of that can
of
be
course.
tricky. And I know educators would rather have the experience at some point,
Oh,
even if it's less
absolutely.
desirable in the
Absolutely.
sequence of program.
Maybe, Nicola, you're going to have to expand. There's going to have to be more kits
Okay,
and more
okay.
review, and so
Yeah.
that you get more incursions and more artifacts out there for
Yeah,
teachers and
yeah,
students.
yeah. And that's
So,
what's great about having the kits as well, because sometimes an incursion is just too big of a thing, whereas teachers can individually hire those items and keep them for 2 to 3 weeks or even longer,
oh,
and they
amazing.
can use them in their classroom in a way that suits their learners or their learning program. They could have it set up in a home corner, or they could bring it out very deliberately for their sessions. It can be used in a way that suits them, as well as offer, obviously, that we offer the incursions too. So we've got options for both styles of learning as well as programming, and the need for the students as well.
Oh, that is an amazing option. So, and I can see by your language as well, and I'm sure that when you spend time in the classroom, how did you see the role of inquiry, or was that something that was quite active with you, evolving in our current educational space, especially around hands on artifacts and hands on learning? Because I think as educators, you and I both know how important hands on learning is
Mhm.
in the early years, especially, but not just in the early years. I think older children, right up year fives and six, I think they still crave those experiences. And many
Definitely.
of them when I've gone into those classrooms, many of them have still not solidified their understanding. So many of them still need concrete materials to help their understanding. Do you think that there is a place for this type of inquiry-based learning? Because I know that there's a massive backlash and people want all the explicit instruction. And that's why I was just so happy and so impressed with you saying, well, you have that explicit instruction lesson. It dovetails all the way through where you're teaching them exactly the language, the I do, you do, we do scenario. And then on top of that, they have this wonderful inquiry experience. Do you think that's the way the schools are going?
Oh, what a question. Because I definitely, especially in the time that I've been out of the classroom adjacent, there's a huge push for explicit teaching, and inquiry-based learning is not the thing. And does it have to be one or the other? Surely there is a way. And my incursion shows there is a way to have both in a way that is helpful for students and their learning. We do need the horse before the cart. You do need prior knowledge and skills to be explicitly taught, but you also then need the opportunity to use them and practice them and develop them. So if we're standing at the front of the classroom reading from our script, is there enough opportunity to practice that skill? Because if we don't, then that information is going to file in and it's going to drip back out again. We need to find that balance. And I think with teachers and educators are so time poor that when we get given a program, read this every morning, it can alleviate the finding of resources and that time. Whereas inquiry can sometimes be or feel perhaps more time consuming, and the collating of resources and that allowing of time and space for children to make those connections themselves can feel tricky, difficult to plan your time when I know there's somebody holding you accountable for every second of your contact time, especially these days. So I understand why some educators, it doesn't fit for them because of the pressures that they're feeling. But we've got to make space for it as well. The opportunity to touch and play and hold and explore is just as important as that explicit teaching of skills and content. There needs to be an opportunity for both, not one or the other. They do work well. They do.
They totally do. We know that, those of us that have been in the classroom and that successfully use both strategies side by side, we know for a fact that they work well. And we also know for a fact that you need both. It's not an and an or, it's like both and more, isn't it? And I do wonder, we are so accountable, as you said, for our time and our contact hours. I was in a workshop with Kath Murdoch recently where she said, don't be seduced into the shallow waters. And to me, that was truly profound, because I thought of the reason why we teach. We teach so that children can have these experiences. We teach because we want children to have those experiences. We don't teach because we want to have those experiences or because we want to have an easier life, although that would be wonderful. But I think if we've made those decisions to be educators, that is a massive responsibility, and it's not for the faint of heart, for sure. And we have to provide these experiences for children, especially if we're saying we're educating the whole child. If we're educating the whole child, then we need both and more. That's just what I feel very, very strongly, is that we can't take these experiences away from children just because it's so much easier for us to read from a text.
100%. I know I've heard a lot. I keep my ear to the ground, and I hear a lot of teachers when I go into schools, they say, I'm not allowed golden time anymore. Our pre-primaries can't go out to eat 5 minutes early together. It's teaching time during our contact time. And, there are so many opportunities that are missed because they don't fit into our programming schedule, but are so, so valuable for our little people. They also need those experiences. Pre-primaries need time to eat with their peers in a communal space to learn those protocols, and then they need time for free play. They need that just as much as they need to practice their sounds explicitly.
Totally.
And like you say, both and more are achievable. And let's calm down and let's find a path where we can offer both, because we know that both experiences and opportunities are so important for learners, especially little ones.
Couldn't
Especially little.
agree more. Couldn't agree
And
more.
what you said about the older children too, because I've recently offered an upper junior incursion for mostly year 4 5s and looking at early settlement of WA. And to do the same thing, to bring learning, to put it in their hands, give them a hands-on opportunity for learning about history. Instead of getting on the bus and going to the museum and walking around, they actually get to do gold panning, panning for gold. They get to dress up as convicts. And I also bring my home corner and dress ups to that incursion. And that is always their favorite station. Year 5, boys and girls in dress ups, role playing, experimenting, exploring the items. They love it because they probably haven't had dress up since year 1, pre-primary, maybe, depending on their school context. And they're or suddenly allowed and encouraged to play in a very imaginative way, and they love it. And I was surprised, I was hopeful that they would enjoy that station, but I was so surprised that it was their favorite consistently going from any school to school, year 4 to year 5. The role play, the dress ups was their favorite station. So year 5s really aren't that old.
No, I was
They're
just
old in the
thinking.
context of primary school, but they're still kids. They still want to play. They still deserve those opportunities for play as well.
These are kids who are only 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
They're 9 and 10,
Yeah.
11. They're still kids. They
Hmm.
still like to play. They still want to be with their mates and their friends and just enjoy themselves. And they love the whole dress up thing and having hands on experiences, because it's not as though they're 18, They are just little children. And we
Yeah.
forget that, as you've said. Nicola, now I understand that you obviously have this fabulous business where you can bring your artifacts to people, but not everybody's lucky enough to live here in Perth and have Play in the Past come and deliver kits to them, or have you come into their classrooms to deliver your program to them. So what advice would you give educators who want to incorporate hands-on experiences, history-focused activities in their classrooms, but perhaps don't have access to you and your materials?
Well, we do have a virtual incursion that we're able to share, and we've done a few of those recently, which has been great. So I can get into classrooms, but the difficulty being it's virtual, it's not hands-on, but still an option. Otherwise, I would always recommend requesting some of your budget to collect some really key items that you can make space for in your resource cupboard. Hopefully there is some space and some budget for a rotary phone, a typewriter, and an old camera. Just a few key pieces that you can keep and all of your school community can use. Another option is some historical societies and libraries do also hire out museum boxes. So definitely investigate them. I don't know how much touch and play can happen with some of those, because question that, query that. Another option, like you say you've done, is you send out the request to families. What items can you have that we can bring in? But having clear expectations with the children as to what they can touch, how they can touch and play as well. Because having those concrete items are just they're memories that they can hold in their hand, and they're moments from history that they can explore in the moment. So those would be my top tips for getting some hands-on history in your school.
I think those are fabulous tips. Just last week, I went to a antique shop, and they had a rotary phone, and I thought, oh, Nicola, I'm sure she has this. And then I also thought, oh, if I was still in the classroom, I would definitely buy this.
Yeah.
And
The
as you
teacher
say,
brain, you can't
there's
turn it
so
off.
much. Yeah,
Whenever
no,
you're in a
there's,
shop, I could use
yeah,
that and I could use that.
candlesticks and gosh, old copper pots, and they're just,
Mhm.
you just have to open your eyes and just wherever you go. And of course, I also think Facebook Marketplace,
Mhm.
amazing. You can just find absolutely anything there.
No,
So
get
that's an
receipts.
amazing thing. Absolutely.
Mhm.
If you could introduce, Nicola, just one artifact, only one from your magnificent collection into a classroom, what would it be and why?
It would definitely be the rotary phone. Definitely. Because there's so much curiosity that happens. And interestingly, I always hear, that's the phone the minions have. So they've seen this phone before, but they've maybe never used one. And it is a real sensory experience for them. They've got to, if they pick it up, they can feel how heavy it is. They've got to learn how to hold the handset because today everything is speakerphone. You know, kids don't do this when they're pretend phone calling, they'll do this. And often they'll hold it upside down and the cord's coming out the top because it's such a different experience and they don't have a real world concept or experience to relate it to because it's so different to what they use. And then having to spin the dial when they don't, there's no screen to tell them what numbers they've pressed, and just going through that experience and process of discovering how this worked then raises so many questions in terms of, well, what do we use today? How did we get from this phone to this phone? And what are some of the changes that have taken place? How did we get from here to here? And then I wonder what's going to be next. And often they'll say at the very end of our incursion, when we're talking about what we've discovered, they'll say, I wonder what it will be next. What's going to be next on the timeline? And so, yeah, rotary phone, go get them.
Fantastic. Listen, and I'm going to ask you one last question. What do you hope that the children and teachers take away from your experiences that they have with play in the past?
I hope that they see that it is worth your time and a little bit of effort and energy to offer these provocations and for play to be a massive part of the learning that happens. And what's so interesting is I see children that at first they may be a bit anxious about playing because they're usually not. Old things are very special and very precious, and you look, you don't touch, they're behind the glass. But that we can say, give permission to little people, no, you can pick it up. You can learn by playing with this. It is a valuable experience and it will enrich your learning. So I hope that they see that there is a way to bring play alongside your explicit teaching model and that it is incredibly valuable for little people when they're learning. And it's so much fun as a grown-up too. I often invite parents to come as parent help, and they have a blast. They love it. And the teachers are like, wow, I had one like that. And in that moment, your memory as the adult with this concrete thing is then shared with your little people. You get to share that memory and go down memory lane with them, which is a really special experience to offer.
Just looking at you, you're so animated when you're talking about this. And that is, I think, why I would love people to understand that when we talk about play in this context, we don't mean off you go outside and just play, which is 100% absolutely unstructured play, is absolutely 100% essential and necessary for children's cognitive development, physical development, emotional development, language development, the list goes on. But this type of play is intentional learning by play, where kids are physically involved, touching and moving and exploring objects or concepts or whatever it might be. These are the kinds of hands-on learning experiences that are playful and intentional and deliver excellent results for kids, because they can now have hands-on experiences, build their schema, get excited, get curious, and really it makes such a difference, so much better than a picture when you can actually handle the object.
Yeah.
Nicola, I know a lot of people probably know about you, and if you don't know about Nicola, seriously, this is the time to get to know her. Tell
Yeah.
people, where can they get hold of you, get hold of Play in the Past, and book you up for incursions into their schools and perhaps get your kits? Where do they go? How do they get hold of you?
The best place to find me is Instagram. I hang out mostly on Instagram, and we've got lots of pictures, images, reels for you to see our incursion in action. We've also got our website, playinthepast.com, as well as Facebook, all over Facebook groups. So please, if you find me, send me a message and we can find a way to get Play in the Past for your kiddos.
This has been an amazing chat, and I really hope that everybody, especially in Perth, anybody listening who's in Perth, you are such lucky ducks to have Play in the Past. Get
Agreed.
Nicola, get her resources, get them into your rooms if you can. Book early for next year, I would say, right? That's my advice to all of you. Nicola, I want to just thank you so much for being on Blooming Curious today. It has been an absolute blast having you here, talking about these wonderful opportunities for children to have hands-on learning experiences. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I wish you the very best of luck, and I hope your business just keeps going from strength to strength, because this is exactly what children and schools need. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So that was Nicola from Play in the Past. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And listen, if you're curious about the positive impact of play and you're looking for actionable strategies to keep kids curious, then go to bloomingcurious.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter. It's called Get Curious, which will give you actionable strategies to keep kids curious. It's the best thing in your inbox. No edubabble, just straight talk. So go to bloomingcurious.com and you'll find it there. And if you found this episode interesting, why not share it with a friend? That way, more people find out about Blooming Curious and more kids get curious. I'll see you all same time, same place next week. And until then, stay blooming curious.